Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. I am John Keir, one of your co-hosts, and joining me, as always, is Austin Davidson, our other co-host on the Stronger Than Steel podcast.
Heyo.
It is Season 4, Episode 7. We just looked at running backs prior to the NFL draft. Now it's time to look at defensive linemen. We get one position closer to the more likely aspect of them being taken by the Steelers in the draft. Defensive line, one that has been thought of as the strength of the Steelers' defensive side of the football the last few years. It has three capable starters and has had a solid couple of backups the last couple of years. So let's take a look on the whole. They've got their starters: Cameron Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, Javon Hargrave. Their backups are Tyson Alualu and Daniel McCullers, and then the practice squad players Lavon Hooks and Connor Sheehy. And they're losing LT Walton in free agency right now. They could probably bring him back to training camp if they want, but time will tell. So those guys right there, what do they have with those players?
Well, obviously Cameron Hayward has been really good the past couple of years. He had 14 sacks last season, 2 seasons ago, and then 8 sacks this past season. Stephon Tuitt didn't start finished 2 years ago not very good. Started the year last year very weak, and then came back. It was just a machine after the first 4 games. And then Javon Hargrave is still he's a starter, but he's still so underutilized. It's just how it is in the NFL nowadays. But he's just so good too. I think that this might be Javon Hargrave's last year with the team. Obviously, he's only got 1 year remaining at the moment, but I hope they actually use him a little bit more this year because when he's on the field, he's got a crazy pressure rate and sack rate. Then with Daniel McCullers, they have their defensive tackle backup that they're in love with for whatever reason, cheap, I guess. And then they got Tyson Alualu, their defensive end backup, and he's been suitable at times when Stephon Tuitt's been hurt. It's pretty decent. Then Lavon Hooks and Connor Sheehy are kind of question marks. Lavon Hooks, actually, I thought almost had a pretty good shot at making the roster last season, so I think he has a pretty good shot at making the roster this season with Latarius Walton gone. So I think that Lavon Hooks is a guy on the rise for the Steelers. Cause I thought he was going to make it last year after he had a pretty strong camp and a pretty strong preseason. So we'll see how he does this season.
Yeah, as we already know, Hayward and Tuitt are two of the best defensive linemen in 3-4 systems in the NFL. They've both done their job pretty well last season. Hayward has been a face of the defense for over 5 years now, and Tuitt coming into his own after earning his contract and struggling a bit, but he seems to have turned it around. And Hargrave has been a fine player himself. Alualu, you mentioned him. He's been a solid backup, a good run defender, kind of limited as a pass rusher, but that's okay. And then McCullers is a limited, better this past year as a backup defensive tackle, but still not really where you want him to be. And then Hooks and Sheehy are question marks, as you mentioned. LT Walton, again, I think you could bring him back to training camp, but I think you already know what he is, and you don't really need him on the roster if you don't want. So storylines at this position, there's really 2 in my mind, and the big one right now is Javon Hargrave. Will he and should he get extended?
I think he should, but I think in his best interest, he should probably move on. He doesn't get the playing time I feel like he could get with another team, and he's really good when he plays. He has that to show. He has that sack rate that I mentioned already. I feel like, as a fan, I want him to come back, but I think he's going to get a pretty solid payday to go somewhere else. So what do you think?
I actually think he will stay in Pittsburgh, and I think they're going to try to get a deal done sometime during training camp this year. I'd be on the lookout for an extension sometime this upcoming training camp. And then finally, it's really how did the Steelers address the depth at defensive line and kind of upgrade, or at least get someone to push Daniel McCullers for the final active defensive line spot on game day? Because right now, if they line up with 6 guys, they've got their 5, but then the 6th would be Hooks or Sheehy, and it's possible that one of them is that guy, but I think the Steelers should at least look into adding one more guy.
Yeah, this is the first position for me that I think should be addressed in the draft in some capacity. The departure of Latarius Walton means that Steelers need a new backup defensive end. And while I think Hooks and Sheehy can compete like they did last year, I think another guy should be brought in to challenge them. Not only that, though, Steelers could get someone better, than Tyson Alualu if they wanted it as well. It would take a higher draft pick, but they could do it if they really wanted to, and then they would have better depth. Also, Daniel McCullers is replaceable at the backup DT position. He could use another year of being challenged as well, like we saw last year when the Steelers drafted Josh Frazier in the 7th round. So that's what I think of the free agency or draft need here. I think that someone should be brought in via the draft. I think free agency is a little bit lost at the moment, so that's what I think. How about you?
Yeah, the Steelers are done kind of spending money in free agency for the most part, so I think if they're getting anyone, it's in the draft. I'll be honest with you. I think anytime after the first 3 picks, the first 2 rounds and the first 3rd round pick, I think defensive line could come into play with our 4th pick in the 3rd round.
Yeah, if the Steelers still have it, yeah.
Agreed. This is all assuming that they don't make trades. I think if they do have those 2 picks, or their 4th pick is in the 4th round, I think that's the first spot you could see a defensive lineman taken.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think a backup defensive tackle that can be better than Daniel McCullers would be valuable for this team. The defensive line has been hurt a lot the past couple of seasons with Stephon Tuitt going down a few times, and Cameron Hayward missed a lot of time just, I think, 3 seasons ago. It might have been 4, but still, a good backup defensive end or defensive tackle could help the Steelers here, and it should be pretty high up on their list.
So you'd be okay with them taking a defensive lineman in the 4th or late 3rd round?
Oh yeah. No, that's perfectly fine for me. If they deem that that's the best they can get right there, that it's better than any position, I wouldn't be mad at it.
I would agree with you. So that being the case, we decided to take a look at both defensive tackles and defensive ends in 3-4 systems because football is becoming more positionless, and now it's more about interior defensive linemen. So first on the list for you, Austin, we have Kevin Givens. Now, is he a defensive tackle or a defensive end in a 3-4? And tell me a little bit about him. And first tell me about name all of your defensive lineman prospects, please.
Sure. So I have John Kaminsky, a defensive end from Charleston. I have Greg Roberts, a defensive end from Baylor. I have Byron Cowart, a defensive tackle from Maryland. And then I also have Kevin Givens, the defensive tackle from Penn State. So I have 2 defensive tackles, 2 defensive ends to look at for today. And starting with Kevin Givens, he is 6'1", 285 pounds. Givens grew up an hour away from Penn State in Altoona, earning first-team All-State honors in high school as both a fullback and a defender. In his redshirt freshman season at Penn State, he got to start 6 of 14 games, getting 26 total stops with 7 tackles for a loss and 4.5 sacks. In 2016, Givens started 5 times in 13 games at both defensive end and defensive tackle, getting 23 tackles, 4 for a loss, 3.5 sacks, and 2 pass breakups. In his junior and final season, he started 12 of 13 games, getting 33 tackles, 10.5 for a loss, and 5 sacks. Givens decided to forego his senior season and declare for the draft as a junior. So what's good about Givens is he has got some pretty strong legs that he uses to work leverages against his opponents and also plays under block. He keeps a consistent knee bend and a low pad level when he plays, which is ideal. His movement is pretty decent as well. He's pretty efficient when he moves, getting in and out of short area operation with good early acceleration and with good quickness in his hands. Another positive about him is he's really good against reach blocks, beating them with sunken hips and a wide lateral first step. The final thing I will say about him is that he was used all over Penn State's line the past 2 seasons and could likely do that in the NFL as well. So going to the other side, there are 2 big things that are being said about him. He lacks the mass you'd want out of an NFL defensive lineman, and he doesn't do well against power, being flush out of the gap and usually struggles to get off powerful blockers. Even worse if the blocker has a powerful punch, as Givens performs really poorly as a pass rusher when after the initial punch. We saw all of this in the Wisconsin game, where he was literally a non-factor because of the strength of that offensive line. Now, the other major problem is he's considered to be a scheme-dependent guy for his success. So the team that drafts him is going to need him to fit basically perfectly in their system for him to be a contributor, which hurts his value a bunch. Now he has some other problems as well. He seems to be slow or really just lack urgency to fight for a blocker's edge as a pass rusher, and also he lacks that fight, the fight to get back across a blocker's face. Essentially, he's washed out if he doesn't win in the early stages. He just gets pushed aside. So Gibbons offers some pretty good movement and versatility across the line, but his size is going to hold him back a lot in this draft. That and the fact that analysts consider to be scheme-dependent really just limits the teams he can or really should go to. Some sites have him going as early as the third round, but quite frankly, I can't see Gibbons going before the sixth round. Maybe late fifth. But to me, Gibbons is a sixth-round pick because he just doesn't offer enough. I was shocked. After watching his tape and doing his review, after seeing what analysts and scouts were saying that he's a third-round pick, I was shocked. I thought for sure Gibbons would be considered like a sixth or seventh-round pick, but I think he's a sixth-round pick. So let's hear about your prospects. Who are they? And then start with your first one.
All right, so I have four different guys, 2 defensive ends and 2 defensive tackles, just like you, Austin. I have Michael Dogby, a defensive end from Temple. I have Jonathan Ledbetter from Georgia, another defensive end. And then my 2 defensive tackles are Chris Slayton from Syracuse and Cortez Broughton from Cincinnati. So starting with Michael Dogby, the defensive end from Temple, a redshirt senior, standing at 6'3" and 284 pounds. He was the 2013 Newark Star Ledger Player of the Year as a senior in high school. Moved on to his freshman year with 4 games, had 3 tackles, and it still counted as a redshirt season, so he managed to get some game action and still had it didn't have it count as a year against his time. So his redshirt freshman year in 2015, he played in 12 games as a reserve, had 14 tackles. His redshirt sophomore year in 2016, he started in 9 games, played in 13, had 43 tackles, a sack and a half, and 5 tackles for a loss. His redshirt junior year, he started in 6 out of 12 games, had 26 tackles and 2 tackles for a loss. And then last year, he broke out, making first-team All-AAC, had 72 tackles, 12 and a half tackles for a loss, 3 forced fumbles, and 7 sacks. So Michael Dogby's, the positives with him is that he's got quick hands to allow for the ability to establish the control over the offensive lineman at the point of attack and can shed blocks quickly. Once shedding blocks, Dogby showed a keen ability to find the ball carrier quickly. He's versatile. He can play in a 1 or 2 gap system, meaning a 3-4 or a 4-3 system. I saw him on tape line up in multiple techniques, including a 3, 4-eye, and a 5 technique as well. An active pass rusher, he can rush from both the A or B gaps. He's agile and athletic enough to line up on the outside and defend the run. He's quick enough to chase down and reel in athletic quarterbacks, and has a quality spin move and a swim move that I saw on tape against Maryland this year. The negatives with Dogby, though, he's got shorter arm length than what is typically wanted from a 5-tech defender. Therefore, he doesn't project as a full-time 3-4 defensive end right now. His play diagnosis and pre-snap reads are average, and he doesn't have great instincts, doesn't react to the offensive lineman's first steps on running plays either, which means he can be blown off the line of scrimmage due to that, and also he fires out a little too high for someone that tall, and when he's not packing as much weight as someone that big normally would, he's going to get blown off. He doesn't set the edge very well on running plays, at least not consistently, and he needs to bulk up and play stronger at the point of attack. Again, his upper body is strong, but his lower body isn't, and that leads to an imbalance, which, again, he can get blown off the ball. It's magnified when he has to stand his ground against down blocks, which you will see when you're interior defensive lineman. Michael Dogby, as I saw, lined up as a 3, 4-eye, and 5-tech player against Maryland. I thought he was a solid player, but he didn't really stand out a ton in my mind. He's not an impact rusher from the outside. But he's decent from the inside. His quick hands really helped him win at the point of attack, and he played pretty well in that game against the run. From what I can tell, he projects as a decent pass rusher with the versatility to be a 1 or 2 gap player, and he's athletic enough to be an okay but not great run defender, but he's not a starter. I think he would be a decent depth player, but his limited upside should make him a day 3 selection, I think round 5. But his versatility should help his draft stock at least a little bit because he did line up in several different spots. So Michael Dogby, an interesting prospect from Temple. Tell me a little bit about Byron Cowart.
Byron Cowart, the defensive tackle from Maryland. He is 6'3" and 298 pounds. He was a very big deal coming out of high school, touted by some as the number 1 recruit in the entire country in 2015, after being an All-American and Florida Class 6A Player of the Year in his senior season. He decided on Auburn and got limited playing time, only getting 12 tackles, 1.5 for a loss, in 23 games as a reserve. He believed this was because the guy that recruited him left to go coach at another school, and this, coupled with his mom having some health issues, led to Cowart leaving Auburn and going to Hillsborough Community College in Tampa for a year. Maryland stepped up and got him on the second time around, trying to recruit him for the 2018 season, and he was named an honorable mention All Big Ten performer for starting all 12 games, posting 38 tackles, 5 for a loss, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, and a forced fumble. He decided to take that production and declare for the NFL draft. So with Cowart, he's definitely got the NFL size and length, coming in with 34-inch arms. You can see why he was one of the top-rated guys coming out of high school with his size. I think what's great about him is that he offers a lot of versatility. He can play in odd or even fronts at several positions and has the potential to bull rush guys even at the NFL level. Next, he does a good job of working under opponents' pads, maintaining a low pad level. We saw this in the game against Ohio State, where he did a great job controlling the point of attack as well as setting a strong edge against Isaiah Prince. I like his willingness to get back into the play, too. He doesn't give up on reps even when he lost the early phase, and also can get rid of blocks when he needs to. Finally, he's flashed some solid hand quickness while rushing inside. So now for the opposite side of things. The biggest problem that scouts have is he's underachieved for most of his college career. He blamed Auburn for not putting him on the field, but it's strange to be considered the number 1 recruit out of high school and not play for 2 years for said school. Another big issue is he doesn't play with control. He's had multiple personal foul penalties in college and needs to really limit those and play smart. Then he has slow bursts when he initially comes off the edge, and when he tries to change the direction, especially in the open field, he's pretty slow as well. Now, there are some fundamental problems, too. Like, he plays with inconsistent pad level, and he plays with tight hips, which hurt his edge rushing. As a whole, he actually is a below-average athlete to be an edge rusher, which probably is going to force him to play mostly defensive tackle at the NFL level, even though he could play on the edge. Then his pass rushing does need some work. He could use a better pop into the initial engagement, and he could work on stacking moves together to really beat his man and get to the quarterback. But that really wraps up his negatives. So prior to the Senior Bowl, an NFL scout said, after he left Auburn, they didn't have a lot of nice things to say about him, but that's not unusual when a player leaves a program. He can't fall back on a bunch of production, so the Senior Bowl and Combine interviews are going to be really important. And while his Combine wasn't great, he outperformed expectations at the Senior Bowl, which helped him. I haven't seen his interviews. I tried looking for somebody. He's just not a high-value guy going into the draft. That being said, though, I think with his size and length, coach really want to try and work with him and mold him into be what he's supposed to be in college. I think he's going to be a late 5th-round pick or an early 6th round, personally, but some analysts have him going as late as a 7th-round pick. So that wraps up Byron Cowart from Maryland. Who is your next prospect?
I looked at Jonathan Ledbetter from Georgia. So the SEC product was a senior out of Georgia this year, standing at 6'4" and 280 pounds. Was a former top 10 defensive tackle recruit and 4-star prospect in high school. Played in 7 games and racked up 4 tackles his freshman year. Suspended in his sophomore season for the first 6 games for multiple alcohol-related arrests, including one where police found him passed out in his car, which is interesting. When he returned, though, he had 4 starts in 7 games, 2.5 tackles for a loss. And his junior year, he started in 11 games, played in all 15 for the SEC champion Georgia Bulldogs on the way to a national championship game against Alabama. He had 38 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks. And then last year, he earned second-team All-SEC honors by starting in 13 out of 14 games, finished with 56 tackles, 1 sack, and 6.5 tackles for a loss. What is good about Jonathan Ledbetter? He has a good anchor for someone that is tall like he is. He has quick hips and has a quick punch to establish control and leverage at the line of scrimmage against offensive linemen. This quick punch coupled with a quick spin move is his best attack. He reads power and counterplays well that utilize pulling linemen. When he is where he usually comes in on these plays where he is unblocked, he takes on pulling linemen very well. This is something I personally like to do. You take on a pulling lineman that crashes down on you. If you can set a strong base like he can, you can take on these pulling linemen and not get blown back very far, and can potentially blow up the play if you take it on strong enough. He does this well. He takes him on with a strong shoulder, and that allows other defenders to flow to the ball carrier. Ledbetter is a high motor guy that can recover from a poor start in a given rep, and he has good balance, allowing him to maintain gap integrity. Ledbetter has a high tackling rate. He rarely lets you go once he has you in his grasp. He has experience playing in a two-gap system, and he's a good hand fighter with good upper body strength. As far as what's bad about Ledbetter, he's kind of a tweener, and he's just like Dogby. He's slim, but he's tall, and that makes it difficult to find him a great fit on an NFL team right now. He might struggle to contribute early on, and there's not much production to speak of from a statistical standpoint, particularly when it comes to rushing the passer. Ledbetter lacks an upfield burst to be a consistent threat as an edge rusher, and I didn't like what I saw from him when he was lined up on the outside. Movement just isn't as fluid as you would like, and he doesn't have a good counter move as a pass rusher. Ledbetter can shoot gaps, but he doesn't get off blocks enough in that system, so he's not a natural 4-3 end right now either. And he stops running his feet at times when he's engaged, which really is just something you should never do. That's something you learn early on growing up as a football player. So Jonathan Ledbetter, I didn't see a game. I saw highlights for him this year. I had trouble finding tape, but I didn't see any of his bad plays for that reason. But from what I can tell, he still has some work to do when he gets to the NFL. Like I said, he just doesn't fit in right now. He needs to either bulk up and be a full-time interior defender, or he needs to get a little more quicker and become a more agile player to become a more frequent and full-time edge or defensive end. He's got good skill and he utilizes a high motor to help him, but that's not going to carry him far enough. His run defense is also not where it needs to be right now. I think Ledbetter has the potential to be a solid backup or rotational defensive lineman, but unless if he improves and makes a commitment to a single position, I wouldn't expect him to be drafted earlier than the 4th round, but I suppose it is possible he could be a late day 2 guy as well. So that was Jonathan Ledbetter from the University of Georgia. Tell me a little bit about Greg Roberts.
Greg Roberts, he's a defensive end from Baylor. He is 6'5" and 264 pounds. Roberts' father pushed him into the football lifestyle as Greg Roberts Sr. won the 1978 Outland Trophy at Oklahoma before starting 42 games for the Buccaneers as an offensive lineman from 1979 to 1982. Greg Roberts decided to play on the opposite side of the ball, coming out of high school a top 100 recruit as a defensive. He chose Baylor and played his first 5 games as a reserve and on special teams, recording 2 tackles. But that was really it for his 2015 season. In his 2016 season, his playtime increased dramatically, going from reserve to a 9-game starter, recording 27 tackles, 3.5 for a loss, and 3 pass breakups through 13 games. In 2017, he was scaled back a bit as he only got to start 6 of 12 games, getting 19 tackles, 4 for a loss, 4 pass breakups, and also 2 blocked kicks. He saved his best season for last, starting 10 of 12 games, getting 33 tackles, 8 for a loss, 3 sacks, and 2 pass breakups as a senior. With his best college season behind him, Greg Roberts declared for the draft. So, as you all know, when they got NFL size and strength, I like to start by talking about it, and Greg Roberts has it. He's got the well-defined frame and strength to potentially play as either a 3-4 defensive end or a 4-3 at the NFL level. It has actually made him quite problematic for tight ends at the college level. There's a lot of tape where tight ends couldn't handle him, even pulling guards at times because he meets with them with so much force and keeps a good knee bend to get some powerful strikes in. Then I really like how quick he is to locate the ball and then twitch and twist to shed his man and try to get there. That combined with his size and strength, that made him pretty challenging to block at times. Oh, he has a bull rusher potential too. If he could time his attacks better, he could be dangerous in that regard. Last thing I got is that he is loose and fluid in space with some decent play speed. So on to the other side, there wasn't a lot of recent tape from his best season. I tried looking for it, but all I was getting was 2017 stuff. I was trying YouTube, I was trying a few other places. So this makes it a little rougher for me. But what I saw, especially in the TCU game in 2017, is that tackles run him up the pocket a lot instead of him trying to cut inside, and he never really proved he could two-gap against tackles. So he's got a bit to prove in that department. The next biggest issue I got is he just hasn't been able to use his hands for anything, really. He really desperately needs to work on it, as it would help with his next problem, separation. Robert is inconsistent getting off his block to make it to the play. Sometimes he gets that separation, sometimes he doesn't. With some better hand usage, he could probably be more consistent with it. For now, it didn't look good. Finally, I don't think he attacks the opponent's weak point enough. He sticks to what he knows rather than adjusting and trying to hit the opponent where they are weak. So that was a problem for me, but that wraps up his negatives. So, Roberts is the son of a former NFL player, and it's obviously got some of the genes passed down to him with his size, but he has a lot to prove at the NFL level. There are mechanical flaws in this game that are really limiting him, a.k.a. his hand usage in both the run and pass game, or should I say, lack thereof. So in terms of draft position, I think Roberts will go mid to late 7th round, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's a priority undrafted free agent because of his strength, but I don't think he's going to go earlier than that, personally. I mean, there's a chance, but I don't think so. So let's hear about Chris Slayton from Syracuse.
Yes, the big boy, standing at 6'4" and 307 pounds. He filled in his body more so than the first two prospects I looked at, and he certainly looked it on tape. He started in 5 games his freshman year and played in 12, finishing with 22 tackles and had 6 tackles for a loss with 1 sack. His sophomore year, he started in all 12 games, 3 at defensive end and 9 at defensive tackle. Finished with 33 sacks, which was tied for first on the team with 10 tackles for a loss, and led the Orange with 4 sacks that year. His junior year, he was a starter again, started every game, finished with 28 tackles, 8.5 tackles for a loss, and 1 sack. And then this past year, his senior year, he was an honorable mention for the All-ACC, starting in 13 games and had 24 tackles with 8 tackles for a loss, 3.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. I looked at 1 game of his against North Carolina State, and I'll be honest, it really wasn't a great game, so I'm going to try not to judge him too hard off of that 1 game because it is just 1 game. But I'll start with the negatives this time. His production just was not great for a 3-year starter. Slayton can get into the backfield but doesn't convert his penetration into tackles and sacks as often as he should. His footwork isn't great and he doesn't move great laterally, but he's okay. Slayton leans too often, which can get him in trouble. He is absolutely not what you would consider a high motor player. Even in the game I watched, it was quite clear that Slayton would give up on some plays if his initial rush was not effective. He didn't chase the quarterback enough and just didn't get off the line super quickly either. His hands aren't quick or skilled enough to win as a pass rusher right now either. On the flip side, what's good about him, though, is that he's a well-built defensive tackle with a broad chest, thick arms, and good muscle mass on him. He's natural and has athletic movement, even for a big man. He has good ankle flexion, and that projects well for a 2-gap player. He has good quickness in the run game off the line of scrimmage, and his shorter legs create more of a natural, sturdier base that helps him fire out low and engage his blockers from a position of strength with good leverage. He can beat some double teams and can create some trouble for quarterbacks with a decent bull rush up the middle. That is not what I saw against North Carolina State, though. He was pretty much a non-factor for most of the game as a pass rusher, and the defense yielded 41 points, and the spread offense doesn't produce big games for players that are built like nose tackles, so I get it. Maybe that's not the best game to look at, but At the end of the day, Slayton has the body of a 4-3 defensive tackle, but watching the way he played, he looked more of like a nose tackle to me. I like some of what I see from Slayton, but he leaves too much on the field, and even though the scheme might have hurt his production, I just don't like players that aren't high motor guys, and he doesn't give the best effort from what I've seen. That's going to need to change if he wants to succeed at the next level. There is potential, but he needs to want to reach it. I think he could be a day 3 selection, probably a 4th or 5th round pick. Could be a day 2 pick, but I don't know. I don't like what I saw from him as much as I had hoped I would. Tell me about your final prospect, John Kaminsky.
Well, he's a defensive end from Charleston. He's 6'5" and 286 pounds. And interestingly, Kaminsky was highly recruited option quarterback coming out of high school. He ended up at the University of Charleston and became a defensive end. So as you would expect, he redshirted his first season. However, he worked hard enough to be an immediate starter in 2015, where he recorded 37 tackles, 5 for a loss, 4 sacks, and 3 pass breakups. In his sophomore season, he garnered second-team All-Mountain East honors for getting 41 tackles, 4 for a loss, and 2.5 sacks. But after that season, he took huge steps forward. In 2017, he was a first-team All-League pick with 73 total stops, 23 tackles for a loss, 6.5 sacks, and he kept it up in 2018. In his senior season, he won Mountain East Defensive Player of the Year for his 67 tackles, 16.5 for a loss, 3 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. Like with Greg Roberts, with his best season behind him, he declared for the draft. So, Kaminsky is another guy that looks like the NFL talent just based off his size. He really worked for it, too. I found out that when he first got to Charleston, he weighed 218 pounds. Man is now 286 pounds. That's absolutely crazy how much muscle he put on. Now, what I like about him is he's very fast for a defensive end. At the combine, he ran a 4.69, and he also has a verified run time of 4.68. That's a good 40 time for even a middle linebacker, and that man's playing defensive end. The only defensive end he ran slower than was likely top 10 pick Rashawn Gary. He also has good lateral speed and change of direction speed, as he had the second best 3-cone drill as well. This speed helps him in a couple of ways. Firstly, it helps him with his get-off, and then secondly, he has a good closing burst to get to a quarterback as a rusher. Now, the area where Kaminsky really excels is against the run. He has used force and great aggression to get an impressive amount of tackles for a loss in college. The last thing I noticed when looking at him was that he's flashed some good upper body torque to get around the edge of a blocker. Now, going to the other side of things, my main concern when I even picked him was who he was facing in college. The teams he had to face weren't exactly the toughest, and when I watched his Senior Bowl tape, I personally wasn't very impressed. I thought it was okay, but nothing to write home about. When he did go against more top end guys in that Senior Bowl, he was most average to me. He was just an average pass rusher, to be fair. He finished the game much stronger than he started, but the beginning was just rough. There are several mechanical problems that play into this. For starters, he's too upright into his rush, which allows blockers to get inside of him and throw him down with good punch. Then he never really had the ability to work his hands and feet in unison to disable that initial punch. And he doesn't seem to get his arm fully extended quick enough after the punch, which gets him stuck for a good amount of time. Basically, his pass rush relies on force and speed rather than angles and hand usage. And at the end of the day, it's just average. Last thing I got to say is he hasn't quite honed his physical traits to be the two-gapper he looks to be. He's going to need to be worked or molded into that role by an NFL team. So with Kaminsky, he has a lot of upside to him. He's not ready to be a starter or anything like that, but with some development where he can learn to use his hands correctly or possibly work with a pass rush specialist or possibly both, he could develop into a gem in this draft. Still, though, right now, he's only good against the run for the most part, which some NFL players have made a career against that, just typically not defensive ends. Damone Harrison is a great defensive tackle that's not a pass rusher. But still, though, I don't expect him to improve right off the bat going to the NFL with his pass rushing. So the earliest I think he'll go is the mid-third. But more realistically, I think Kaminsky is going to be drafted in the early 4th, as he has a great frame to try and mold and develop to being a great defensive end. So again, this was John Kaminsky out of Charleston. It's in one of the Carolinas, I forget. So let's go to Cortez Broughton.
Cortez Broughton, the defensive tackle from Cincinnati, a redshirt senior. If that name is familiar to baseball fans, it's because he participated in the Little League World Series in 2009. That's a fun fact. His freshman year, he played in just 2 games and then redshirted due to injury that season. So his redshirt freshman season, he started 11 games and played in 12 games, had 28 tackles and a tackle and a half for a loss. His redshirt sophomore year, he was second-team All-AAC. This would have been 2016, starting in 12 games, racking up 42 tackles, 5 tackles for a loss, and 2.5 sacks. His redshirt junior year, he started in all 12 games, made 34 tackles, 3.5 tackles for a loss, and 1 sack. And then last year, he was first-team All-AAC, racking up 13 starts with 51 tackles, had 17.5 tackles for a loss, and 6.5 sacks to go with 5 pass breakups. So last year was a big one for Broughton. He's a high energy and high motor guy. That's one of the things I love about him. And he was noted by coaches for good leadership and personality traits. That breakout 2018 season opened scouts' eyes this year. And due to having multiple coaches in his time at Cincinnati, Broughton has experience playing all over the defensive line and over multiple fronts as well. So he'll fit in pretty much anywhere, or at least we'll have a good understanding no matter where he plays. Broughton is quick enough laterally to make plays on zone running plays. He'll make it difficult for slower linemen to get him on reach blocks. He reads plays well and knows when to shoot the gaps. He showed good flashes of strength at the point of attack, which is something interesting to build off of. He has an adequate anchor against double teams, and from what I saw on tape against UCLA, he did not get blown back, and has a decent but not a great bull rush. And he, with his 5 pass breakups, he can knock passes down at the line of scrimmage. Broughton, though, is a little smaller, standing at just just 6'2" and 293 pounds. He's a little smaller than what's desired from an average interior defender these days. Not really long enough either. He doesn't have much of a developed pass rushing counter outside of his standard bull rush. He doesn't have a ton of explosiveness off the line of scrimmage, meaning he needs to get his burst off of guessing the snap count, which can be dangerous. He also doesn't know how to deal with cut blocks, which will wipe him out of the play. Broughton has quick feet, which is nice, but his slow hands lag behind him. His punch isn't very strong or quick either, so it really doesn't help him. And lateral movements on twists and stunts really just aren't fast enough. They didn't show up on tape well either. So bottom line, I liked what I saw from him against UCLA. He didn't really grow a ton for the most part out of his college career because he had 5 defensive line coaches in 5 years and never got the stability in teaching that he needed. He has solid talent and should improve with consistent coaching, but I still don't think he'll be much more than a backup or rotational guy since he lacks the common build and length that you want from a guy at this position. I think he is a 7th round pick or likely a priority undrafted free agent. So that was Cortez Broughton. Now that we've looked at all 8 of our defensive line prospects, Austin, let's rank them.
So, for me, Byron Coward out of Maryland was my favorite prospect. I think he could be a steal because we only got to see 1 full season of what he could do. I genuinely do believe it was Auburn's fault and not his for him not getting on the field. He's just so physically gifted, and for the price tag of maybe a 5th at most, I would love Coward to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. After him comes Greg Roberts. Again, he has a physical gift to work with. I just didn't feel like he didn't offer the upside that Coward did. Still, though, Steelers could get Roberts as an undrafted free agent. I would be more than happy to have him in camp to just see what he could do. After that is John Kaminsky. And I actually did like him, but his value just wasn't there for me. After his Senior Bowl, scouts are projecting to be a 3rd-round pick, but I just did not feel the same. He only offers ability right now as a run stopper, and that is valuable, but not 3rd-round pick valuable when the Steelers have other positions they should address first. I was also concerned with his competition since he played in Division II, but really the draft position was the biggest factor. I felt like, because I've seen a few mock drafts now, that the longer one that had him going early in the 3rd round, and the Steelers just really couldn't get there. And that leaves Kevin Givens to last. He left me super unimpressed from his tape. And the price tag, analysts are putting on him really bother me. So if he somehow falls to the Steelers late in the 6th round, fine. But anything earlier than that is too expensive for me. There's a chance he doesn't even fit with the Steelers scheme either, which is completely dependent on how he succeeds. So I was not a fan of Kevin Givens. Watched his tape, I was bored. He didn't really do anything impressive. A lot of his highlights, so to say, were just him being the first to touch a guy and then his teammates finishing it up. There wasn't a play I was like, wow, he made a really good play on that by himself. I don't know. I think if a team drafts Kevin Givens in the 3rd round, they're making a huge mistake.
All right, my prospects, I had Jonathan Ledbetter's first look. I love guys with a high motor, and there's room for him to continue to grow. I think he'd be a good add to this defensive line. He might be a bit earlier, though, so it might be harder to pick him up, but I think he could be a good day 3 pick. Michael Dogby, he's not far behind in my mind. He's a solid player, but I don't think he has as much upside. I just like the potential of Ledbetter better. Cortez Broughton is 3rd for me. I like him, but I just don't think he's bringing much to the table for the Steelers right now. And with their recent commitments to Daniel McCullers, I find it unlikely Broughton would push him this year. I'd like him as a priority undrafted free agent if possible, but I don't think he would be. He's someone that you would want to spend a draft pick on because he's not going to be adding much this year. He could just be another Josh Frazier, and I think I liked Josh Frazier better than I like Cortez Broughton personally. Finally, I have Chris Slayton. Again, Slayton, I watched a poor game against North Carolina State. That wasn't necessarily his fault. The defense itself was horrible. And there are some things I like about him, but he needs to improve his motor and overall effort. You can see some really good things from him, but I wouldn't bank on that after he was a 3-year starter at Syracuse. That really didn't improve a whole lot once he first got into the lineup. So now that we've looked at our guys, how is the depth chart going to look for the defensive line room in 2019?
For me, the starters are going to be Cameron Hayward, Javon Hargrave, Stephon Tuitt. The first defensive end off the bench is going to be Alu. The first DT off the bench is going to be Dan McCullers. And then after that, I have a hunch that it's going to be Lavon Hooks, because Hooks was close last year. I'm not saying the Steelers aren't going to draft a defensive lineman. I think Lavon Hooks is going to beat out late defensive lineman for that final spot. So that's my hunch I'm going with. How about you?
I got the same starters, Hayward, Tuitt, and Hargrave. I have Alu, the 4th guy off the bench, and the 5th defensive lineman. I'm actually going to go with the draft pick here. I'm hoping it's a mid, relatively, an early, late day 2 selection as the 5th defensive lineman, and my game day inactive I have as Daniel McCullers. So I'm hoping and praying that that's how it goes down. That'll wrap up this episode of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have any questions, please feel free to email the show at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. And please visit our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you so much for joining me today. And as always, Steelers Nation, have a great night.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.